She had never imagined that life could change so completely in a single moment. One sunny afternoon, the phone rang, shattering the quiet comfort of her home. The voice on the other end was calm but carried words that would haunt her forever. Her husband, the man she had shared her life with, the man who had been her partner, her confidant, and her friend, had passed away. The news came like a storm, leaving her numb and unable to comprehend the reality. The days that followed were a blur. The house felt emptier than ever, as if the walls themselves were mourning. She walked through each room, touching the familiar things that had once been full of life and laughter, now strangely lifeless. His chair, still slightly tilted from where he had last leaned back, stared at her silently. His favorite mug sat untouched on the kitchen counter, a reminder that he would not return to fill it with his morning tea. Every corner of the home held a memory, and each memory was a sharp pang of pain. Her son, still too young to fully understand death, sensed the change but could not put it into words. He wandered the rooms with a quiet sadness, his small hands holding onto memories like fragile glass. He asked questions that broke her heart, questions she struggled to answer. "Where is he?" he asked one afternoon, his eyes wide with innocent fear. "Why isn't he coming home?" She knelt beside him, her arms wrapped around his small body, wishing she could explain in words that would soothe. But words failed her. All she could do was whisper, "He's gone, my love. He's gone, but we remember him." And in that moment, she realized the depth of their loss, how fragile life truly was, and how much they had to endure without him. The funeral had been a sea of faces, people she barely knew, but who felt compelled to show their sympathy. There were flowers in overwhelming numbers, letters with kind words that barely scratched the surface of her grief, and strangers who hugged her as if they could somehow transfer strength through their arms. She moved through the ceremony like a ghost, smiling when necessary, nodding when expected, but inside she was a storm of sorrow. The coffin, a final vessel for the love of her life, was lowered into the ground, and she felt a part of her soul go with it. Her son clung to her hand tightly, feeling the weight of the moment even if he did not understand it fully. Life after the funeral was not easier. In many ways it was harder. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now echoed with silence. Every morning she rose to face the empty bed beside her, the empty space that once held his presence. She tried to find solace in routines, in work, in anything that could distract her from the ache in her chest. But nothing was enough. Her son, though young, understood that his world had changed. He became quieter, thoughtful, and in ways that surprised her, more independent. He would wander the garden for hours, picking flowers and placing them near his father's photograph, speaking softly, as if the flowers could carry his words to him. Nights were the hardest. The quiet darkness seemed to amplify every thought, every memory. She would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the life they had built together, the dreams they had shared, and the future that would never be. Tears came easily, sometimes unexpectedly, and her son would sit up beside her, rubbing her back, whispering, "It's okay, Mom, it's okay." His innocence and love were a balm to her wounds, but even his presence could not erase the emptiness. Friends and relatives visited occasionally, bringing food, offering condolences, trying to fill the gaps that only time could heal. Some stayed longer, sharing stories and memories of him, making her smile through the tears. Others left quickly, unsure of what to say, leaving her with a sense of isolation. She began to understand that grief was a personal journey, and no amount of sympathy could truly bridge the chasm of loss. It was something she had to face alone, with only her son by her side, both of them clinging to each other in a world that felt abruptly changed. She found herself going through his belongings, not out of nostalgia alone, but as a way to feel close to him. There were letters, photographs, and small items that seemed to carry fragments of his soul. She would hold them close, inhaling the faint scent that lingered, closing her eyes and imagining his presence. Each item told a story, each memory a reminder of the love they had shared. But amidst the comfort, there was also pain, a reminder that those moments could never return. Her son, with his keen observation, noticed everything. He would point to his father's shoes by the door and ask why they were not worn anymore. Or he would sit quietly with a toy, talking to it as if telling it about his father. Sometimes he would sit beside her with a book, trying to distract her from the sadness, his small voice reading aloud in stilted, hesitant words. She treasured these moments, knowing they were the threads holding them together. the bridge between past and present, between grief and hope. Months passed. Each day a challenge, each night a test of endurance. She found small routines that helped her cope. Simple acts like tending the garden, baking her son's favorite treats, or walking in the nearby park. Nature seemed to offer a quiet solace, a gentle reminder that life continued even when it felt impossible. Birds sang in the morning, flowers bloomed in the sunlight, and the wind whispered through the trees, as if carrying messages from the one they had lost. Yet, despite these small comforts, the shadow of loss remained. Certain times, certain places, and certain sounds would bring her to her knees. The laughter of other families, the sound of a familiar song on the radio, even the smell of his favorite meal being prepared, all could trigger the flood of memories that both healed and hurt. Her son, perceptive and sensitive, began to develop his own ways of coping, sometimes withdrawing into silence, other times speaking softly about things that only he could see in his imagination. In quiet moments, she would catch herself imagining conversations, what he might say, what he would do, what advice he would offer. These imagined interactions were both painful and comforting, a testament to the enduring love she felt for him. She realized that grief was not just about missing someone. It was about learning to live with their absence while carrying their presence in her heart. As the first year without him passed, she began to notice subtle changes in her son. He had grown more introspective, more thoughtful, and sometimes there was a glint of something in his eyes that she could not quite understand. He would speak of dreams, of visions, or of memories that seemed too detailed for his age. At times he would stare at the garden, at the flowers, at the empty chair, and ask questions that made her pause, questions that were both innocent and strangely profound. One afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through the window, he turned to her with a seriousness that was unusual for his age. His small face was solemn, his eyes wide with curiosity and determination. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we dig him up?" She froze, her mind racing, her heart pounding. The words were impossible, shocking, and yet, spoken with a quiet conviction that demanded attention. She looked at him, searching for understanding, for a clue as to why he would ask such a thing, but his expression was earnest, unafraid, and full of a strange certainty. She felt a whirlwind of emotions, fear, confusion, disbelief, and even a flicker of hope. Was this a child's innocent curiosity, or was there something more behind his request? She struggled to find words, to explain why such a thing could not be done, why it was impossible, inappropriate, and yet she could not dismiss the seriousness in his eyes. It was a moment that would mark the beginning of a journey neither of them could have predicted, a journey that would challenge their understanding of love, loss, and the mysterious ways life can unfold. As the evening shadows grew longer, she held him close, feeling the warmth of his small body against her own. She whispered reassurances, even as her mind raced with questions and fears. She did not know what the future held, but she knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Her grief, her love, and her determination to protect and understand her son were stronger than ever. The bond between them, forged through loss and nurtured through care, would guide them into the unknown, where astonishing truths awaited. Truths that would test their courage and reveal the extraordinary ways in which love can endure even beyond death. The days after the first year without him were filled with quiet struggle and small victories. Life continued around her, but it moved at a pace that often felt too fast, too relentless. She tried to hold on to routines to create a sense of normalcy for her son and herself, yet each morning brought reminders of what they had lost. The kitchen still smelled faintly of his favorite coffee. The garden still bore the flowers he loved, and each room whispered memories she could neither ignore nor escape. Her son, more thoughtful than ever, had developed a routine of his own. Every morning he would wake early and place a small bouquet by his father's photograph, often talking softly to him as if he could hear every word. Sometimes he would write short notes on scraps of paper and leave them in the garden, explaining small secrets or dreams, believing in some way that his father would receive them. She watched him in awe and quiet sorrow, realizing that this boy so young was developing ways to cope that were both tender and strange. His grief had taken a form that was both visible and invisible, a silent strength that amazed her. She herself tried to fill her days with work and small chores. Baking became her therapy, each cookie or loaf of bread kneaded with both care and distraction. She cleaned and tidied, Not because the house demanded it, but because it helped her feel in control in a world that seemed to have lost all balance. Still, even as she moved through these routines, moments of grief struck without warning. She would catch herself staring at the empty chair at the dining table, at the coat that hung untouched by the door, or at the photographs that told stories she could no longer fully participate in. Tears would come unexpectedly, often when she least expected them. Her son was sensitive to these moments. He would climb onto her lap or hold her hand, offering silent comfort, sometimes with words that were astonishing in their simplicity and wisdom. "It's okay, Mom," he would whisper. "We still have each other." And in that whisper she found both solace and a deep understanding of the bond that grief had forged between them. Together they navigated the quiet afternoons, the lonely evenings, and the occasional bright mornings that reminded them that life was moving forward, even as their hearts held on to the past. She began to notice subtle changes in him, the way he lingered near the garden, the way he paused over certain flowers, and the thoughtful expression that crossed his face more often than before. It was as if he was searching for something that only he could perceive. Sometimes he would stare at the sky for hours, whispering questions that seemed more suited for an adult, questions about life, death, and the world beyond. She listened carefully, never dismissing his curiosity even when it left her puzzled and concerned. She realized that his mind was processing things differently than her own, that his grief and his imagination were weaving together in ways she could not yet understand. Friends and neighbors noticed these changes too. Some expressed worry, others admiration. They saw a boy who was growing quickly in maturity, who seemed to carry a deep understanding of life far beyond his years. People would say, "He reminds me so much of his father," and each time she heard it, it felt like both a comfort and a fresh wound. The comparisons were natural, she knew, yet they carried a weight that sometimes pressed down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Despite the challenges, she found small moments of joy. They would take walks in the park where her son's laughter would ring out among the trees. They would cook together, experimenting with recipes and sharing the satisfaction of creating something new. On some evenings, they would sit on the porch watching the sunset and talk about the past, the present, and the future. She found that in these moments, the weight of grief lightened just enough to remind her that life, though altered, still held beauty. But there was an undercurrent of tension, subtle and persistent. Her son began to ask questions that she could not answer easily. "Mom, do you think Dad would want us to find something he left for us?" he asked one afternoon, holding a small toy he had found tucked away in an old box. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. The question was innocent, yet it carried an odd weight, a suggestion that there might be more to the story than she had imagined. She tried to soothe him with gentle words, telling him that sometimes things remain hidden, and that some memories are meant to stay where they are. But his gaze was steady, unyielding, and she sensed that he was not ready to let the matter rest. She began to notice other signs, small but persistent. He would linger near certain areas of the house, gaze longingly at the old photograph albums, and occasionally mutter words under his breath that seemed to be conversations with someone invisible. He was not afraid, not troubled, but intensely focused. There was a determination in him, a quiet insistence that something needed to be uncovered. It made her uneasy, yet she also admired his resolve, even if she could not fully comprehend its purpose. The year had changed them both, in ways subtle and profound. She was more cautious, more aware of the fragility of life. He was more curious, more contemplative, and yet more resilient than she had expected. They had learned to lean on each other, to find strength in shared grief, and to recognize that love could endure even in absence. Yet, beneath this growth, there lingered a sense of anticipation, a feeling that something important was waiting to be revealed. One evening, as the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, her son approached her with a quiet confidence that startled her. He held an old notebook he had discovered, a notebook that had belonged to his father. "Mom," he said, his voice firm yet gentle, "I think Dad left something for us. I think we need to find it." She felt a chill run down her spine, mixed with a strange curiosity. She had expected grief, sadness, and longing, but not this sense of purpose, of mystery that her son carried with him like a small, glowing flame. She looked at him, searching for understanding, for a clue to what he meant. But his eyes held nothing but sincerity and determination. "We have to look carefully, Mom," he continued. "I think he wanted us to find it when the time was right." She felt a wave of conflicting emotions: fear, hope, disbelief, and anticipation. The idea seemed impossible, almost absurd. And yet there was something in the way he spoke, in the conviction behind his words, that made her heart beat faster. Days passed as she watched him, noticing the careful ways he moved around the house, the way he studied old photographs, letters, and belongings. He seemed to know what to look for, guided by intuition or memory she could not comprehend. She helped where she could, offering guidance and support, yet always feeling like an observer to a process that was partly hidden from her understanding. There was a rhythm to it, a quiet unfolding that demanded patience and attention, and she realized that this was becoming more than a search. It was a journey of discovery, of healing, and perhaps of closure. Neighbors and friends began to notice a change too. The boy, once quiet and reserved, now carried a sense of purpose. He would speak of his father not with sadness alone, but with curiosity, as if trying to connect the threads of a story that was partly missing. People whispered about the unusual behavior, speculated about what he might be seeking, yet she paid little attention to the chatter. This was their journey, private and sacred, and no outside voice could influence its course. One afternoon, she found herself standing in the garden, watching her son carefully examine the soil near an old tree. He was kneeling, brushing away dirt and leaves, his hands gentle yet deliberate. She felt a strange mix of awe and anxiety, wondering what he hoped to find, fearing what might be revealed. Yet she stayed close, offering silent support, feeling the pulse of life and curiosity that flowed through him. It was a reminder that even in loss, there was movement, there was discovery, and there was the possibility of something extraordinary. Night fell, and they returned to the house exhausted but quietly exhilarated. They shared a simple meal, spoke softly about their day, and prepared for sleep. Yet the air was filled with anticipation, an unspoken understanding that something important was approaching. She could feel it in the way her son moved, in the intensity of his focus, and in the subtle changes in their home that spoke of attention, discovery, and preparation. As she lay beside him that night, listening to his steady breathing, she reflected on the journey they had undertaken. The first year after his father's death had been a year of sorrow, of adjustment, and of quiet resilience. Now, as they moved into the second year, there was a sense of movement, of purpose, and of anticipation. Her son, with his curiosity and determination, was leading them toward something she could not yet see, something that promised astonishment, revelation, and perhaps the closure they had long sought. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his small hand in hers, and allowed herself a moment of hope. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time she sensed that the path ahead, though uncertain, was filled with possibility. And in that quiet moment, mother and son, bound by grief, love, and unwavering connection, prepared to face whatever lay ahead together, ready to uncover the truths that had been waiting silently for their discovery. The next few weeks brought a mixture of excitement and tension. Her son's insistence on finding what his father had left behind became stronger with each passing day. He spoke less of the past and more of discovery, often gazing at the ground or at the old photographs with intense focus. She tried to follow him, helping where she could, but a constant worry lingered in her mind. Digging up a grave was unthinkable, and yet his insistence gnawed at her. He was no longer asking casually. Now he was determined, convinced that there was something important waiting for them. One morning he approached her while she was preparing breakfast. His hands held a small notebook she had not seen before, worn and frayed at the edges. "Mom, I think Dad left a message in here," he said, his voice steady yet filled with a mix of hope and urgency. He opened the notebook carefully and showed her drawings, symbols, and notes written in a handwriting that seemed familiar and yet mysterious. Some words were clear, some were almost like riddles, and she could feel her heart racing. She knew immediately that this was not a child's random play. There was intention behind every mark, every page. She sat down beside him, trying to understand. "Where did you find this?" she asked, her voice gentle but tinged with caution. "In the attic," he replied. "It was under some old boxes. I think he wanted me to find it when the time was right." She looked at the notebook again, tracing the lines and letters with her fingers. Her mind raced with possibilities, fear mingling with curiosity. The thought of disturbing his father's final resting place was overwhelming. Yet the notebook seemed to beckon them forward, promising answers, revelations, and closure. Days turned into a flurry of preparation. Her son drew maps, made lists, and organized what they would need. He spoke of tools, careful measurements, and even rituals he thought necessary to honor his father. She watched, fascinated and apprehensive, as the boy took charge of this strange mission. She realized that he had inherited more than just memories from his father. He had inherited a sense of determination, courage, and a deep understanding of the unseen threads that connected their family. The community began to take notice. Some neighbors whispered in curiosity, while others openly questioned the wisdom of such a pursuit. She heard remarks like, "Why would he want to do that? And is it safe for them?" Yet she ignored the voices, understanding that this was a private journey, one that only they could navigate. She felt a strange mix of pride and worry. Her son was brave beyond his years, but the path he had chosen was filled with uncertainty. Finally, the day arrived. They walked together to the cemetery, carrying small tools, notebooks, and hearts heavy with anticipation. Her son moved with a confidence that belied his age, scanning the area as if guided by something unseen. She followed quietly, her mind a mixture of fear, hope, and curiosity. Each step felt monumental, each breath heavy with the weight of what they were about to do. Standing before the grave, her son looked at her and spoke softly but firmly. "Mom, he wanted us to do this." "I know it." She felt a lump rise in her throat. The weight of his words was immense. She had spent a year grappling with loss, navigating grief, and learning to live without him. Now here was her son insisting on taking a step she had never imagined, and yet she sensed in his conviction a truth she could not deny. She nodded slowly, her hands trembling as she reached for his small ones. Together they began the careful work of uncovering what lay beneath the earth. The digging was slow and deliberate. Each handful of soil brought memories, thoughts, and emotions to the surface. She found herself thinking of the life they had shared, the love that had once filled the house, and the laughter that now existed only in echoes. Her son worked with a quiet intensity, focused and unafraid, brushing away the dirt as if revealing secrets that had waited patiently for this very moment. There was a sacredness to the act, a connection between past and present, and she felt both awe and fear. As they continued, her mind wandered to the boy's determination. How had he known so clearly that this was what needed to be done? How had he sensed the existence of something important, hidden beneath layers of soil, time, and memory? She could not answer, but she trusted him. He had always carried a sense of intuition and insight that amazed her, even in the smallest of actions. She realized that this was not just a quest for discovery. It was a journey of understanding, of connection, and of honoring the love that had been lost but never forgotten. Finally, after what felt like hours, the edge of something solid appeared. They paused, holding their breath, hearts pounding in unison. Her son carefully brushed away the remaining dirt, revealing a small weathered box. The sight of it brought tears to her eyes, a mixture of relief, anticipation, and awe. The box seemed almost alive, as if it had been waiting for this precise moment, for these two hearts to uncover it together. Her son opened the box with trembling hands, revealing its contents. Inside were letters, photographs, and small objects, each carefully preserved and intentionally placed. Some letters were addressed to her, some to him, and some were written as if to the future, containing wisdom, love, and guidance. Photographs captured moments she had forgotten, small snapshots of joy, laughter, and intimacy. Objects held personal significance, tokens of love and memory carefully chosen and hidden for the day they would be discovered. She sat down beside her son, overwhelmed by emotion. He looked at her, eyes shining with tears and excitement. "Mom, he wanted us to have this," he whispered. "He wanted us to find it together, to understand, to remember." She nodded, feeling a deep, almost spiritual connection between them, a bond that had transcended death itself. The grief that had weighed so heavily for the past year was now mixed with a profound sense of wonder, gratitude, and closure. They spent hours going through the contents of the box. Letters were read aloud, photographs examined, and objects handled with reverence. Each item brought stories to life, memories to the surface, and a deeper understanding of the man she had loved, the father her son had admired, and the family they had built together. The house, the garden, the park, and even the empty chair at the dining table were no longer just reminders of absence. They were part of a living story, a testament to love, resilience, and memory. Her son, curious and thoughtful, asked questions, made connections, and pieced together the hidden messages with an intuition that amazed her. She watched him, marveling at his focus and insight, realizing that this experience was shaping him in ways she could not have anticipated. It was not just about finding objects. It was about understanding life, love, and the importance of remembering those who had shaped their world. The boy's heart, his determination, and his connection to his father were teaching her as much as she was guiding him. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the cemetery, they carefully returned the box to its place, not to rebury it entirely, but to preserve the sacredness of discovery. The act itself, the journey of finding, connecting, and understanding had changed them both. The grief that had once felt unending was now tempered by love, memory, and revelation. They walked home hand in hand, feeling lighter, closer, and more connected than ever. The journey had not been without fear or uncertainty. Every step had demanded courage, patience, and trust. But in the end, the reward was immeasurable. A connection to the past that gave them strength for the future, a discovery that honored the man they had loved, and a bond between mother and son that had been tested and strengthened through grief, love, and shared purpose. They returned home, hearts full, carrying not just the box but the memory of the journey itself. A journey that had begun with grief but had ended in understanding, hope, and the astonishing power of love preserved beyond the limits of life and death. The discovery of the box had opened a new chapter in their lives, one filled with awe, emotion, and the quiet hum of understanding. Yet even as they returned home with hearts lighter than they had been in months, the contents of the box demanded careful attention. Each letter, photograph, and token carried messages that needed to be unraveled, memories that needed to be honored, and secrets that demanded acknowledgement. Her son approached the task with seriousness, reading aloud from the letters in a voice both steady and filled with reverence. She listened carefully, absorbing every word, feeling her emotions swell and ebb like the tide. The letters revealed things she had never known, small gestures of love and concern, plans for the future that could not be fulfilled, and advice meant for her and her son. There was a sense of intentionality behind every sentence, a careful crafting meant to guide them even after his absence. Tears streamed down her face as she realized that he had thought of them constantly, planning for a time when they would need him most. Her son, too, was moved, his small hands trembling as he held the papers, his eyes wide with wonder. They spent days going through each item. Photographs captured moments they had shared, moments they had forgotten, and moments they had never known. There were images of family vacations, quiet mornings at home, birthdays, and simple acts of love. Each photograph was accompanied by a note, a memory, or a question, almost like a conversation across time. Her son would ask questions, and together, they would discuss what these images meant, piecing together the life and love that had preceded their grief. It was as if his father's presence had returned, speaking to them gently, guiding them through memories and emotions with a wisdom that transcended death. Among the items, there were small objects that carried deep personal meaning. A watch, a key, a ring, each carefully placed and chosen for them to find. Her son handled each with care, asking about their significance, and she would explain what she knew. Some objects brought tears, some laughter, and some quiet reflection. The room was filled with the echoes of their father's life, his personality, and his enduring love. She realized that grief was no longer just about absence. It was about presence in new and unexpected ways. One afternoon, while examining a particular letter, they discovered instructions that were far more surprising. The letter suggested that there was a place hidden and secret, where he had stored something important for them. He had chosen this method to ensure that they would work together, that they would experience discovery, and that they would grow through the process. Her son looked at her, eyes shining with excitement. "Mom, he wanted us to find this together. He wanted to make sure we understood it as a team." She nodded, feeling a mixture of awe and apprehension. The instructions were clear, but they required careful execution and unwavering focus. Preparations began once more. Her son mapped out the locations, made careful notes, and gathered the tools they would need. She assisted, but largely she let him lead, recognizing that this was his journey as much as hers. Each day their bond deepened, strengthened by shared purpose and trust. They moved with quiet determination, a mother and son united by grief, love, and a desire to connect with the man who had shaped their lives. The community, as before, watched with curiosity and whispered speculation. Some thought the boy was too young to understand what he was doing. Others marveled at his intuition and determination. She ignored the external opinions, focusing instead on the journey before them. She realized that this experience was about more than discovery. It was about trust, love, resilience, and the ability to find hope in unexpected places. The journey led them back to the cemetery. The box had been a start, but the letters hinted at a deeper treasure, something hidden carefully to ensure it would be found when the time was right. Her son approached the task with precision, identifying the exact location as described in the notes. He knelt carefully, brushing away soil with a reverence that stunned her. She stood beside him, hands trembling, heart pounding as they uncovered what had been hidden for so long. Beneath the earth they found a small metal container, weathered but intact. The boy's eyes widened with anticipation. He gently opened it, revealing photographs, letters, and a journal, each item meticulously preserved. She reached for one, feeling the weight of history and love in her hands. The journal contained reflections, memories, and guidance, written in a voice that was both familiar and comforting. Each word seemed to speak directly to them, offering wisdom, reassurance, and an enduring presence that made the impossible feel tangible. Her son read passages aloud, and they sat together in the quiet cemetery, absorbing every line. The letters spoke of courage, love, and the importance of memory. They offered guidance on facing challenges, dealing with grief, and embracing life fully despite loss. There were anecdotes, recollections of small moments, and philosophical musings on the nature of life and death. The mother felt her heart swell, realizing that even in death, the man she loved had found a way to nurture, guide, and protect them. Some passages were deeply personal, revealing thoughts and emotions he had never shared with anyone. She and her son exchanged glances, understanding the depth of his foresight, the care he had taken to ensure they would find him in these pages. Tears fell freely, not just from sorrow but from awe and gratitude. It was as if he had returned to them, offering comfort, wisdom, and love through the careful arrangement of words and memories. As the day progressed, they explored the contents fully. Photographs told stories that words alone could not capture. Objects held symbolism, reminding them of his presence, his love, and his life. Letters addressed to each of them provided guidance, reflections, and encouragement. They marveled at the detail, the thoughtfulness, and the love embedded in every choice he had made. This was more than a discovery. It was a revelation, a bridge connecting past and present, grief and hope. Her son asked questions with the seriousness of someone much older than his age. Each inquiry sparked conversation, reflection, and understanding. They discussed memories, emotions, and lessons embedded in the letters and photographs. She realized that the process was not just about uncovering hidden items. It was about uncovering understanding, resilience, and connection. Through the act of discovery, they were healing, growing, and learning to embrace life once more. As evening approached, they carefully repacked the container, ensuring everything was preserved and protected. They returned home, hearts full, feeling a sense of closure tempered with wonder. The discovery had not only revealed treasures and messages, but had also strengthened the bond between mother and son. They had navigated fear, uncertainty, and grief together, emerging with a deeper understanding of love, memory, and the enduring power of family. Over the following days, they continued to explore the contents at home. They created a small corner dedicated to the memories, letters, photographs, and objects, a place where they could return for reflection, guidance, and comfort. Her son would spend hours reading the letters, examining photographs, and reflecting on the messages, while she observed, offering insight and sharing her own recollections. Together, they created rituals and routines that honored the past while embracing the present. The experience had transformed them. Grief was no longer a heavy shadow. It had become a presence they could interact with, learn from, and accept. Love had transcended absence, guiding their actions, thoughts, and emotions. They had discovered not just physical objects, but a deeper connection to the man they had lost, to each other, and to life itself. They understood that even in death, love could be expressed, guidance could be offered, and presence could be felt. Her son, now more thoughtful, focused, and mature, continued to grow with this understanding. He began to apply the lessons, insights, and reflections he had uncovered, navigating the world with a sense of wisdom that belied his years. She observed his growth with pride, amazement, and gratitude. The journey they had undertaken together had not only revealed hidden treasures, but had also nurtured character, resilience, and emotional depth. The mother felt a profound sense of closure. The fear and uncertainty that had haunted her for months were replaced with understanding, hope, and peace. The discovery had been more than a quest. It had been a journey of healing, love, and connection. She realized that life could be filled with unexpected lessons, that even in the face of loss there were moments of wonder, and that love, once expressed, could endure in ways beyond imagination. As they sat together one evening, reviewing the letters and photographs, she felt a quiet serenity. Her son leaned against her, small hands holding hers, and she knew that they were ready to face the future together. The journey of discovery had strengthened them, healed wounds, and created a bond that would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. The past, once painful and inaccessible, had become a source of strength, understanding, and connection. They had uncovered the astonishing truth hidden beneath the earth, but more importantly, they had discovered the enduring power of love, memory, and family. The experience had taught them that grief could coexist with hope, that loss could reveal hidden treasures, and that even the smallest acts of intention could carry profound meaning across time. They had faced the unknown together, navigated fear, and embraced the lessons left behind, emerging stronger, closer, and more connected than ever before. The days that followed the discovery were filled with reflection, understanding, and a quiet sense of joy. Life had changed, not only because of the loss they had endured, but also because of the astonishing journey they had undertaken together. The mother watched her son closely, noticing how he had grown through this experience. He was more thoughtful, more aware, and more connected to the world around him. Yet he retained the warmth and innocence that made his presence comforting and full of hope. They began to establish routines around what they had found. Each letter, photograph, and object had its place, a special corner of their home dedicated to memories, stories, and lessons from the past. Her son would spend hours examining photographs, rereading letters, and contemplating the objects that had been left for them. She joined him, sharing her own recollections, adding context, and helping him understand the deeper significance of each item. They laughed together, cried together, and sometimes simply sat in silence, feeling the presence of the man they had loved and lost. Neighbors and friends noticed a change in them as well. The mother, once weighed down by grief, now carried a calm strength. Her son, once quiet and introspective, now radiated a sense of confidence and purpose. People often remarked on how they seemed closer than ever, their bond visible in the way they interacted, spoke, and supported each other. She realized that the journey they had shared had done more than uncover hidden messages. It had nurtured resilience, understanding, and emotional growth. One afternoon, her son approached her with a thoughtful expression. He held a small photograph in his hands, a picture taken years ago, one they had discovered in the box at the cemetery. "Mom," he said softly, "I think Dad wanted us to remember this moment, not just because of what we see here, but because of how it makes us feel." She took the photograph from him, looking closely at the image, seeing the happiness and love captured within it. She understood immediately what he meant. The photograph was more than a memory. It was a reminder of the joy they had shared and the love that still connected them.